A Russian army soldier has shared a video from the so-called Road of Death in Russia's Belgorod region. The Russian soldier, who was rushing to evacuate the wounded in a UAZ Patriot vehicle, said that he was targeted by Ukrainian drones. As can be seen from the footage spread on Telegram channels, there are remains of a large number of equipment and military trucks destroyed by Ukrainian drones on the road. The Russian military said that the number of their equipment destroyed on the road doubled in one day, and the UAZ Patriot vehicle on which the footage was taken was also struck and blown up by a Ukrainian drone a day later. It should be noted that the Ukrainian army has been conducting military operations in Belgorod region since March.
As expected, after a 2-week build-up in Rozliv, the occupation Russian forces have not only begun to rapidly expand their zone of control in the village itself, but also attempted a quick breakthrough to the Donetsk-Zaporizhia highway to cut off the escape route for the defenders of Constantinople, according to Espresso. However, the defense forces of Ukraine destroyed the breakthrough group and repelled this attack on a key logistic artery. Nevertheless, it is currently unknown whether the armed forces of Ukraine will be able to counterattack and return Rozliv under their control. If this does not happen, sooner or later the Russian army will come out onto the highway. And then Ukrainian defensive garrisons in Constantinople and Andriivka, which have been holding a stable defense for several months, will have to retreat to Bohatyr and Oleksiivka. Espresso says that attack on Pokrovsk similarly failed. Despite talk that the Russians are preparing to attack the city with new forces, this week the number of assaults has decreased somewhat, and the armed forces of Ukraine continued to successfully counterattack. In particular, the Russian advance in Lysivka, where they captured half of the village Ukraine had previously liberated, was responded to by the defense forces with a strike on Shevchenko. Here, the armed forces of Ukraine have been controlling half of the town for almost a month and are continuing to push the Russians back to the Solonenka River. In addition, Ukrainian heroes attacked in Kotlin, where they completely pushed the occupying Russian forces back from the southern part of the village to the south of the railway line and also created a kilometer-long grey zone south of it. Instead, the enemy continues to storm Uspenivka, which the defense forces have already liberated once. The number of clashes in Toretsk indicates that this is one of the priority goals for the Russian armed forces in the near future. After all, a breakthrough on this front could change the situation both in the Pokrovsk direction and in Chasiv Yar, and also actually launch an offensive from the south on the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. The Ukrainian armed forces have failed to stop the expansion of the Russian bridgehead on the right bank of the Zerabets River. After long, unsuccessful attacks in the direction of Kolodziaz, through which Russia wanted to reach Lyman, the enemy changed the vector of the offensive and directed it to the west and north, thus creating a threat of a breakthrough to Oskil in the direction of Izium and Borova. However, the pace of advance of the Russian armed forces is currently quite slow, and the defense forces are gradually stabilizing the situation. Fierce fighting is taking place almost along the entire border of the Sumy region and the Russian Federation. This has always been the hottest section of the front after Pokrovsk, and over the past week, the number of clashes has increased by 30%. Both the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian troops are actively forming a border buffer zone, creating more and more new battlefields. Jakarta has received an official request from Moscow seeking permission for Russian Aerospace Forces aircraft to be based at a facility in Indonesia's easternmost province. Separate sources from the Indonesian government have confirmed with Janes that the request was received by the Office of the Minister of Defense, Jafri Sjamsidin, following his meeting with Secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, in February 2025. In the request, Russia seeks to base several long-range aircraft at the Manua Air Force Base, which shares a runway with the Franz Kaisyapo Airport. Documents that have been presented to Janes reveal the airbase is situated in Biak Numfor in the Indonesian province of Papua, and it is home to the Indonesian Air Force's Aviation Squadron 27, which operates a fleet of CN-235 surveillance aircraft. It is also home to the Indonesian Air Force's newly established 9th Air Wing, which has yet to be assigned with aircraft types. In the request, no details were given regarding the number of airframes or types of aircraft that the Russian Aerospace Forces intends to deploy at Biak Numfor. However, Janes understands that over the past few years, Russian Aerospace Forces have made several ad hoc requests to land its Tupolev Tu-95 bombers and Il-76 airlifters at the same airbase. Some of these requests have been acceded to by the Indonesian Air Force. The details on Russia's leasing request to Indonesia are unknown for now, the Janes journalists emphasize. However, based on the fact that Russians have previously requested to land their Il-76 and Tu-95 there, Defense Express assumes that it's precisely the military strategic aviation that the Kremlin needs the Indonesian airbase for. It is also possible that Russia wants to hide its Il-76 and Tu-95 aircraft in Indonesia to protect them from Ukrainian drone and missile strikes. Importantly, Russia seeking to base its long-range aviation in Indonesia could indicate Moscow's preparation for participation in a big war in the Indo-Pacific, most likely on the side of China, considering that Manua is only about 1,200 kilometers north of the Australian continent shores. Despite the seemingly long-standing relations between Moscow and Jakarta, there is not much else to seek from such a partnership besides war preparations. In fact, the USSR had lost all of its influence in this remote country back in 1965 during the attempted communist coup in Indonesia. In February 2022, following the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine, Indonesia refused to proceed with the purchase of Russian Su-35S fighter aircraft and instead chose the French Rafale. However, Indonesia then suddenly joined the BRICS bloc in January 2025. Other than that, the country has been one of the traditional buyers of Russian aircraft in Asia.